Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're back at it, more MR2 content. Last week, honestly, I couldn't do a video. I went to the gym, started back, well, I've always been going to the gym, but I went to the gym hoping to go back hardcore, and I pulled my back. So there was no way I was getting on, on this type of stuff, working on the cars. I just couldn't. I was laid up in bed. But I'm back 100%. Well, kind of like 85%, but I can do some work. So today, as I promised last video, we did the transmission, and this is for the Gen4 Mr2 Swap. So I had these axles for the E153 and the boots were broken, at least on one of them, so we decided to do all 4 boots. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to replace the boots. Now, as we go through the video, you're going to see there's a cage and a couple of bearings, and it's kind of, if you don't know what you're doing, like all these videos, then it becomes a challenge. So we're gonna hopefully show you guys how to put this axle, pull it apart, put it back together, so you can do it at home. Honestly, it's not too complicated, but you don't know what you don't know. If you're using an E153 transmission with axles, this is a part number for the boot kit. So hopefully you guys can see that. And then I'll show you guys what's inside. So this is from Toyota. I just went ahead and got it from Toyota. I'm sure you can get aftermarket stuff that would work, but what I like about this kit is it comes with everything you need. So basically you got the 2 rubber boots that you're going to need to replace. One is a little bit larger than the other one, which is, smaller one is on the inside, larger one on the outside. And then it has the grease that goes in the outer and the inner, and also the little C-clip and the clamps that you need to put the boot on. So honestly, I would just go with Toyota, and also this little gasket that goes on the end right here. So that's the good thing about the Toyota kit. Probably pay a little bit more than what you could probably source the pieces separate for, but with this kit, it has everything, and once you start the job, you can finish it. So without further ado, let's get going. I'm just gonna do one axle, which is the one right here. I started doing the other side already, but I'm just gonna show you guys one, because all you need to do is, if you know how to do one, then you can do both. So let's just go ahead, let's get started, and I'm going to show you how we do this. So here's the half shafts out. That one started, as I mentioned, this one we're going to do it from scratch. So you got to get it out. There are a couple Allen bolts that you'll pull on the outside here, assuming you have this on the car. Obviously this one is off the car. So you'll pull these Allen bolts to get this separated, and then you have your axle ready to go. Now what I'm going to start off by doing is removing these clamps. All right, that frees the boot, and once we remove the side, then we're going to be able to take this piece off with the gears and the bearings inside, and then get to this one. So let's start off by getting this clamp off. Depending on this clamp, style of clamp you have, I don't know if this is factory or not, but this one you just kind of pry up on it, and it slips off, and literally that's it. It comes off just like that. This is a different style, so I don't know which one is OEM at this point. But this one has 2 little tabs, and I want to say this might be OEM because the one in the Toyota kit has these style clamps. But you pry these 2 tabs up, and just gotta work in there. Then you get this under, and then basically you pull this over, and then it should be able to slide right out, just like that. This one is off, okay? Let's go ahead and get these off as well. Same procedure as I just demonstrated. All right, so I use this to open it up and then slip the screwdriver under. And basically that's how you get this clip off. Again, I don't really have the right tool, so it took a little bit of extra time. There is a proper tool for it. I don't have one, but that doesn't mean you can't do this, right? So there it is. Boom. All right. So now what gets everybody is, see these, the inner race and the bearings, there's 6 of them, 6 of these ball bearings. And then you have this little inner race as well. So now we got to slide this out. Now, just looking at this, I want to show you guys, if you look at, here, let me try to clean this up. Disclaimer, this is a messy job, so if you don't like working with grease, do not do this at home because it is a messy job. But if you look at it, you see the outer cage. See, there's a narrow section, a wider section, a narrow section, a wider section, narrow, wide. And then that aligns with the narrow section here. So wide and narrow, narrow and wide, wide and narrow, narrow and wide, and wide and narrow. So that's the configuration. On the opposite side, when you look at it, once I get the rubber off, you're going to see it's this wide section along with this wide section because it's reverse on the back end. I hope that helps explain it. But essentially, I want you guys to see this is the orientation it needs to be in because it gives the joint the ability to flex like this, go in and out, and flex back and forth. So now what we're going to do is slide this entire piece off the boot, and then we're going to slide the entire cage out. All right, let's slide this inner boot off. Just going to put the screwdriver in here, pop it back, and then we're going to now try to pull this entire cage off. And sometimes these things come off easy, sometimes you got to really hammer it off. Open this out. This one looks like it will cooperate, so it's going to slide right off. Okay, and I'm keeping everything intact. I'm going to pull it apart. I just want to make sure I know the orientation. There you go, got it out. And let's look at this orientation. Now, here's what I want to show you. I got to clean this up a little bit. So this is a section that came out here. If you have old rags, guys, just get an really old rag, and because this you're gonna have to throw it away. There's so much grease you gotta clean up. So let's just wipe all of this grease out. All right. And then if you look at the inner race, if you notice in here, there's a lower section and then it has a ridge. So this lower section is actually what slips on. So it should be on the inside of the axle, just so you see the orientation. So basically the lower ridge is on the side where the boot goes on. So you have to put that back on the same way. If you put it the opposite way, it's not gonna slide all the way onto the axle, and therefore it's not gonna work properly, okay? So that's one thing we gotta note. And let me get this out now so we can clean this up and put it back together. I'm just gonna clean this up. I'm gonna slide this boot off because it has a ton of grease in there, so that way I'll get most of it off. Okay, and I keep a little bag handy because this is messy. I just throw all the old stuff in there and bulky grease. I'm gonna wipe this off. All right, so this is the stage where I call the cleanup stage. So there's tons of grease. I'm gonna take the inner rubber off now, and then we'll get back to this guy because this is what really gives most people a hard time. So we'll slide this rubber off, and guess what we're gonna run into? More grease again. So slide this down. Yep, it's messy. And here's where your rag comes in really handy. Just trying to get all of this grease out of here because we're going to replace this with the new grease that comes in the kit. Now, if your rubber is not broken, I mean, I don't think you have to go crazy trying to clean every single grease out of this thing because at least it's not contaminated. If your rubber is broken, then probably it's a good idea to clean up all of it as much as you can because dirt or whatever foreign matter might have gotten inside there. So it's in your best interest to keep it as clean as you can and put all that new grease to help the system work better and be preserved for the future. So I'm just going to clean all of this up, then we'll come back, we'll talk about how we reassemble it. Alright, so I got it all cleaned up, the outer section in here. So now I'm going to slide the boot on. So there are two boots as I mentioned. The larger one goes on the outer section and the small one goes on the inner. So we're going to slide the boot on and just literally just push it on and slip it down. And we're just going to leave this in place for now. We'll go afterwards, we'll add the grease, but for now I'm just going to slip it on. And then we're going to work on the inner section, and I'll show you guys. You know, I'm basically taking it off. The same way I'm taking it off is the same way I'm going to put it back on, but just in case, for whatever reason, you pull it apart and kind of got lost, I'm going to try to give you some tips here so you'll know how to find your way. Inner boot going on now. This one's a little bit tighter than the outer one just because it's smaller, but same principle, you just push it on. There you go, and then it's going to slip into this little groove. Boom. All right, so now let's get to the technical side, which is this piece. So again, I would recommend, if your boot was not broken, don't necessarily pull this out, but I'm going to pull it out for the video just so you guys see how it works. So it won't go out on the side where the boot comes, it will come out on this side. So we're basically going to turn it over and we're going to just lift this up. And there it is, okay? So now we can clean this up and then we'll show you guys how to put it back in. Alright guys, so I want to demonstrate this. I was showing you guys earlier, but it was kind of hard because it was covered in grease. So if you see the splines here, there's a wider section at the tip here. So it goes down. So this section actually goes on like this, right? So it has to go on like this, where the lower section is going to slip over here and it's going to stop. If you put it on like this, it's not going to work properly because it's going to stop right here and the joint won't swivel properly. So make sure when you put it on, this is the orientation that it goes on, okay? All right, now this is what gets everybody. So as you can see, there's a wider section and a smaller section here. The idea is when you're putting this cage back in, and I'm showing you guys without the race and the bearings in place, you're gonna put the fat section with the fat section here. So it literally goes on like this, okay? So that's what confuses a lot of people. If you put it on the opposite way, like this, it's not gonna work properly. So it's the inner piece going in like that. I don't know how to explain it, right? So basically you're gonna put the wider section with the wider section and you slip it on just like that. Get these bearings in. Again, I'm not cleaning up too much of the grease off of these bearings because this boot was not broken and the grease kind of helps to keep it in place. So now we are going to slip this in. So I have a wide section here, I have a wide section here, and I'm basically gonna line it up the same way. And I did put some marks here with this number 8, just to kind of make sure I'm going back to proper orientation. And then this is where it just gets tricky. You just gotta get this perfectly centered and you just gotta work it in till you get this thing slipped on. I like to kind of put it down like this and then pick the whole thing up, flip it over, and then just try to massage it in. And that's what happens most of the time. You gotta try again. All right, so we'll just start over. We'll do this all over again. All right, guys, so I finally got it back on with all the bearings in. And the way I like to tell is the fat side here is with the narrow side here. The narrow side is with the fat side. When you're putting it in, on this end, it's fat side to fat side, right? I know it's kind of confusing, but essentially, that's the way you got to do it. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll try to explain it. So now I'm going to go slip this onto here. And again, we have the lower detent on the spines. So that goes on inside. So you simply just get it on here and just work it down. And probably shouldn't need to tap anything. I'm going to try to push it down. That should be enough. There you go. And then we're going to put the washer that we had now back on here and we should be good to go. In the meantime, I don't want these balls to fall out, so I'm gonna pull this rubber boot over it to kind of keep everything in place. And then once I get the clip on, then we'll go ahead and we'll fill the grease and finally put the clamps on. So I'm gonna throw this rubber boot on here. There you go. So now at least I know these things won't fall out. And we're gonna get the new clip that comes with the kit, slip it on here, and then we're pretty much done. I'll take this gasket off in a second, and we'll put a new one on, and then we'll bolt everything up to the spline. All right, so once you hear that locked in place, then you know your clip is on. Again, if you have the right tool, it's a lot easier. I don't, but we still made it work. We're at a point where we need to put the grease in. So this is the part number for the yellow grease, and that one goes on the inner joint, sorry. The black grease goes on the outer joint. So black, we're gonna put that here. So I'm just gonna flip the axle up, pull this boot off, and we're just gonna fill it, and then we're gonna throw the clamps on. We'll do the same on this side. We'll pull the boot here, just fill it with grease, and put the clamps on, and that's pretty much rebuilding the axle, or replacing the boot on the axle. I wouldn't necessarily say we're rebuilding the axle because we're not replacing any part except the boot. So I'm gonna call this replacing the boots on your E153 axles. Let's get this grease in. Alright guys, so what I'm going to do is, before I fill the grease on the inner side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this little quart gasket on here because there's going to be grease all over. It's going to be harder to get this thing glued on. It has a self-adhesion on the back here, so we'll remove this, glue this one back down, and then we can add the grease. So that way at least I know we'll have adhesion without all this grease spilling over into here. I think it's a better way to do it. So let me remove this. We're just going to take a little screwdriver just to get the gasket up, just like that. Just work it around. And we'll just clean the surface off really good before we stick it. And then we'll add the grease, and pretty much we're done. Now I'm gonna bolt up the ends here so you guys will see that as well. And then that's it. Pretty much you have replaced the boots and have a nice set of axles to go with our Gen4 Swap. So we should be looking good. So we'll just clean up right here, glue on the new one, and we're good to go. All right, so here's a new gasket. I thought it was gonna be self-adhesive, or you know, because it's on that tape, but pretty much it just sits on there. So I'm not gonna put it on until I'm putting this piece on, which is the spline that goes into the transmission. So I'm going to put the grease, put the clamps on, and then we'll come back, put this gasket, bolt this up, and then we'll be done. Because if I do it right now, it's just going to fall off. So I'd rather just put it on when I'm bolting everything up. So lesson learned as we're doing this process. All right, grease is in, so we're gonna put our gasket on, and we're gonna bolt the spline that goes into the transmission onto here. So we just simply take this, it's clean inside, and we're just gonna drop it on right here. And I'm just making sure the orientation, it doesn't really matter. So we just go like that. And now we're gonna get these bolts in. Alright, so pretty much we got this axle complete. I did put the hex bolts in, as you can see here. So now we have everything bolted up. And then I can put the clamps on. Now one thing I want to point out, when you're putting the clamps on, it actually makes sense to put the Allen screws in first, because if you put the clamp, for example, let's say, let me give you an example. let's say you put the clamp on right here, and the head, this head here stops like right about there. If you can see that detail, then you're gonna have a hard time getting your Allen wrench in. So you wanna make sure the head is somewhere around here, so there's enough clearance for you to get your tool in to torque these things down when you're working on the car. So I would say, you know, again, just my advice, when you're doing this, bolt the spline on first. Make sure you know where the hex bolts are before you position at least the inner clamp here, because that could affect you in the long run if you're trying to take this thing back off. I'm gonna button this one up, get the clamps on. For this side, we're pretty much gonna do the very same thing we just did on this side. The only thing different here, we have the carry bearing that goes, this is on the right side of the car, of the engine. So same procedure, you just bolt it up, but just wanted to show that just the spline that goes into the tranny is a little bit different from left to right, which you guys probably know if you have an E153 and you're doing this yourself. With that said, let me throw the clamps on, and that will wrap us for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. You know, some of these things, it's hard to explain, because especially when we're talking about putting in the bearings and the slim side and the fat side, the wide side and the small side, but hopefully it was clear enough for you guys to understand it. And you know, again, it's a messy job, but it's definitely not a hard job. I'm actually very happy I took this on instead of sending it to a shop. So the first time I had one of these, I sent it to a shop and I regretted it, and now I did it myself, and in hindsight, I should have always done it myself. So, you know, with that said, I encourage you guys to do that, and kind of do what I'm doing here and help yourself out, save some money, and you get the satisfaction of knowing you did it yourself. With that said, guys, the Gen 4 is ready to go. We have the engine mated with the tranny, the wiring is done, we have the axles ready to go. So all that's left is to get the car here and put the engine in and just keep moving forward. So with that said, let me put the clamps on, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Two clamps, two larger clamps. One is larger than the other one. This bigger one goes on the outer joint because it's a bigger boot, and then this one goes on here. The two clamps are inside here are the same size, so you can't really mess those up. But just make sure you put the larger one on the outside, so you know, one less thing to worry about. You don't want to try to put this one on the wrong side and then gotta go buy new clamps. So if you simply just get it in place like that, then just kind of push down on it, and it just locks itself in place. And then use these tabs just to push over, and that locks it down.